In the past few years, Formula One has tried to build a bigger presence in the United States. On paper, it may seem like the only reason for F1's lack of popularity in the United States is due to its lack of American drivers and teams. Or you can trace it back to the whole 2005 US Grand Prix debacle. It had a huge effect on the last two US Grand Prix that were held at Indianapolis, but that was a decade and a half ago. With the help of Liberty Media, they've been able to get Formula One in front of a broader audience in the States. Grand Prix in Austin, Texas, as well as Miami, Florida have sold out, and with Las Vegas soon to be added to the schedule, we are about to see 3 Formula One Grand Prix in the States for the first time since the early 1980s. The sport's definitely in a much better place out here than it was 15 years ago. Heck, I got into the sport more recently because of Drive to Survive and because the Formula One video games are usually pretty good. Even though we have all of these positives going towards it out here, I think it's still going to be held back. And it's not because of race start times in other countries, the lack of American drivers in the field, or because Americans just simply might not like the racing product. No, I think the root of the problem has to do with elitism. When you look back on American history, our culture tends to reject elitism. Americans are more in favor of the average Joe or the underdog. And I'm not saying that we don't have any sort of elitism in this country, because we do, it's just not widely popular. While other countries have just accepted elitism as part of their system, Americans will always reject it. Most of them strive for a country that is based off of principles that all people are equal and deserve equal rights as well as opportunities. It's further proof that our country just has way different values than others. Elitism in F1 can be found in a bunch of different areas, from the drivers to the teams and even the fans. The lack of American drivers in recent years can really be traced back to this issue. Former American F1 driver Scott Speed once said, "It is financially impossible for almost all kids growing up racing karts to move to Europe. Also, finding the funding to do it is almost impossible, and without doing that, F1 may as well be happening on Mars." Obviously, funding is needed for any type of racing series, but in F1, if you don't have a major backing behind you, you simply don't have a shot. You can say the problems with F1 driver selections not only stem from elitism, but also a little bit of power and money. As proven by former F1 driver Nikita Mazepin, or as some like to call Mazepin, money and power can be more important than talent. Now moving on to the teams. It seems to be impossible for any sort of underdog to score a win in Formula One. NASCAR and IndyCar have amazing parity, as we just recently wrapped up the regular season in NASCAR with not only 15 different winners, but also in IndyCar, we currently have 4 to 5 drivers competing for the championship. In the history of F1, however, you've always needed to have the most money, it seems. The most successful teams tend to be the richer ones. Teams like Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes are more likely to win simply because they have the most money. The richer teams are always going to dominate on the Formula One grid, and it's been like that throughout most of its history. Not to say the richer NASCAR or IndyCar teams don't dominate, but there's simply way more parity in those two. That really tells me that F1 is pretty unapologetic about its elitism. It's viewed as the pinnacle of motorsport. These teams have to be world class. The best teams and drivers compete on the world stage. I mean, the sport knowingly promotes elitism. Just watch an episode of Drive to Survive and see the way these team principles describe the environment. It's cutthroat. You need power and money in order to move up in the sport, in order to get wins, to get better finishes. Because of this uneven playing field, it's way harder for underdogs to try and win races. And finally, let's talk about elitism in the fan base. Oh my god, the freaking fan base. NASCAR fans are definitely toxic from time to time, but it doesn't compare to the way F1 fans view any other motorsport. I'm not saying all of them have this attitude, but it seems like there's enough to call it out. Sometimes they'll talk down to you with this sense of superiority, like, oh, you're not the pinnacle of motorsports, so nothing else matters. I got told by a few of them last year to stick to redneck racing. Well, first of all, I'm half black, so that comment's not really gonna work on me. Secondly, what happened to just letting fans enjoy what they want? I can definitely see why Americans are hard-pressed to get into Formula One. I've seen a few of them try their best to do so, but they simply don't like the toxicity, among other things. They don't like being talked down to. This might be a bit of a hot take, but you can honestly make the argument that these F1 elitist fans aren't real motorsports fans. A real motorsports fan is going to watch any type of racing no matter what. And if they don't like something in particular, they're not just going to put someone down simply because they disagree with them. If you don't like watching drivers turn left on ovals, I get it. But there should be at least some appreciation for what they do, but it seems like a lot of the fan base just discredits them. And it shouldn't be much of a surprise that parts of the fan base feel this way when F1 consistently promotes elitism all the time. F1 and NASCAR fans can definitely be some of the most ignorant fan bases in all of racing, but you have to give the edge to Formula One in this case. The chances are that some of these fans have little to no racing experience of their own, and they don't watch many other motorsports outside of F1. They view any other series and their drivers as talentless hacks or washed up has-beens, as well as second-rate drivers. Despite some of these setbacks, some Americans are still getting more and more into F1, including myself. The brand new car as well as the budget caps seem to have evened out the playing field a little bit, giving these smaller teams a better chance to score points. F1 is definitely gaining a small portion of the American motorsports fan base, but NASCAR is always going to appeal to that average Joe. NASCAR is always going to appeal to the majority of the American public, but that's not to say F1 can't have a little piece of the pie themselves. They're definitely in a much better place in the States compared to 15 years ago. But unless they drastically change the culture around their motorsport, they are never going to appeal to most Americans, not because of start times or racing product. It'll be because of elitism amongst drivers, teams, and the fan base. Only time will tell if the trend of F1 becoming more and more popular in the States continues. But for now, let me know down in the comments below if you agree or disagree with some of the points I've made. Don't be afraid to share your thoughts on the matter. And once again, that'll do it for another video. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is Black Flags Matter. Catch you next time.